Hi, this is Professor William Wagner, and it's Faith and Freedom Friday. There's an important Title IX federal decision that just came down. There were some LGBTQ activists who had actually challenged the federal law that allows for accommodation of religious universities, private Christian schools who are acting under their sincerely held religious conscience, and they're exercising conscience with regard to following the Bible. And the students challenged the part of the law that would allow for religious academic institutions to, exercise their conscience. And they said, and they were saying, "Hey, we got to make this, illegal and get rid of it." Well, a federal judge, Judge Ann Aiken of the U.S. District Court, in a district court in Oregon, stated that this case must be dismissed. And again, this is really important to understand why cases like this should be dismissed. These students that sought to get rid of the part of the law that allows a religious institution or a religious academic institution to, exercise freedom of conscience and try to make that illegal. They're contending all the time that, these institutions are discriminating against somebody based on who they are. And that is never the case with regard to, religious, institutions. And that's what the judge said here. And this was a judge appointed, not by any far right Republican, but appointed by Bill Clinton. And the judge came down and, looking at the evidence, said plaintiffs have submitted no allegations of discriminatory motivation on the part of those enacting the religious exemption, she wrote. And that's what she wrote. And then she said, to the contrary, plaintiffs argue when Congress enacted Title IX protections for or discrimination against sexuality, they weren't looking, behind any of that. And so and that's what's important to understand here. When somebody contests and says that, a religious institution is discriminating against the person based on their sexual orientation, check and peel back the onion layer, and you're going to find out that that's not the case. What the religious institution is doing is seeking an accommodation so that they can exercise their sincerely held religious conscience to follow the dictates of the Bible. And that's two very different intents and two very different, hearts here. And I think if, maybe we can bridge a gap and come together and have a civil conversation about this, someday, and stop throwing stones, at each other, or worse than that, filing lawsuits, against each other. In other things that are happening this week, the U.S. Supreme Court has agreed to hear a case about a former U.S. Postal Service worker who has asked the court to look at a many years old test to determine whether an employee can deny religious accommodation requests. And so, once again, this is a matter of sincerely held religious conscience, sincerely held belief, the freedom of thought, the freedom of conscience. And the question is, how do we protect that of an employee who wants to be able to exercise, that faith, and maybe go to church on Sunday or to synagogue, or go to whatever a person's religious faith is, and the way that they practice their faith. Should they be able to do that, or should employers, just refuse, and should the government just refuse to accommodate that? So again, if we can just sit down, have a civil discussion, peel back the onion layers, look at what the heart of the religious person is doing, and you're going to see that they're not doing anything that's a subterfuge or a bad thing. What they're doing is they're exercising their conscience. They're exercising sincerely held, religious, beliefs. And so, again, there's a lot going, on here in the country. a couple of things on the area of life and protecting the sanctity of human life. Right now, we've got new ways to kill babies, and different pharmacies it's reported that they're going to start carrying these pills, and the Christian Post reports that a nurse was fired for not prescribing these abortion drugs, and has sued a CVS pharmacy. And so, again, can the government, can a private employer force a religious person to act against their conscience, even in ways that will result in the death of an unborn child? Let's end, though, today on a more positive, an uplifting note. We have a great anniversary of the hymn Amazing Grace. It's the 250th anniversary of this wonderful hymn, and the story, behind that. If you don't know it, John Newton was a horrendous, horrible slave trader, and yes, even somebody as wretched as the most wretched of all, they can find redemption in the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, and that's what he did, and lived the rest of his life to help end the slave trade, and was a pastor to and friends with William Wilberforce, who was instrumental in ending the global slave trade. But he also wrote one of the most amazing hymns of all time, Amazing Grace. And we celebrate the 250th anniversary of that hymn right now, and that story behind it. You can be the next Wilberforce, you can be the next John Newton. Who will stand for truth, who will go out there and with compassion and respect and love, be fiercely unafraid, to stand for truth. Like the NFL, not the NFL, sorry, the NHL, the National Hockey League player who stood alone and exercised religious conscience, and refused to bow down to the idols of whatever the political motivations were that he was trying to be, that employers were trying to force him to stand for. He said, no, I'm going to stand for my faith instead this week. And so so many of these examples are out there, and I'm looking forward to covering them and analyzing each one of them, so that we can take them on and again fiercely stand for truth, but do it in a way that is compassionate and productive. And so until next time, this is Professor William Wagner, and this has been Faith and Freedom Friday.